Hello, my name is Debbie and I am a missionary in Bolivia with my husband Graham. We've been here for the last 25 years and lots of you already know us, and as a church you do support us. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to share with you some thoughts that have been going around in my mind and my heart over these last few weeks that I think will help us to reflect on the reality that we're living right now. I don't know how many of you heard, last year there were a number of people speaking, preaching, sharing, talking about the significance of the year 2020. Because if we think about how we use 2020 in what context, we use it in the context of talking about our eyesight. 2020 vision is perfect vision. I do not have 2020 vision, hence the need to wear glasses all the time. And a lot of people were saying last year that 2020 was going to be a significant year spiritually because God was going to allow us to be able to see things more clearly. And I'm sure that none of the people that spoke like that last year had any idea what we were going to be facing in 2020, that we were going to be in the middle of a global pandemic, that really life as we know it was going to change. And probably change permanently. There's a lot of the changes that have happened that will not go back to the way they were before, and a lot of things that we've learned. And actually, when I start to think about it and reflect, I do feel like God has given us the opportunity in this year 2020 to see things a lot more clearly. And so then I started to reflect on a personal level. Okay, well, what is it that God is teaching me? What is He showing me? With more clarity. And I want to share with you some of my thoughts and encourage you actually to spend some time with the Lord and to seek Him and to ask Him what He wants to show you with more clarity in your life. For me, the first thing that has really struck me is the two key questions to life. When we were in England last year, we had the opportunity in a number of different churches to share about the two key questions of life. Who is God and who am I? And the importance of those questions and the need to really wrestle with those questions until we come up with clear answers. And the biblical examples of people like Martha in the story of Mary and Martha, their sisters, who initially didn't have a clear understanding of who God was or who she was and was too busy serving and doing and being active and wanting to gain acceptance and approval and significance, than actually going to Jesus and understanding who she was in Him and how much He loved her and that He was the main thing that she needed. And we can see her progress after her brother Lazarus dies. It's actually she is the first one who runs to Jesus quicker than Mary, because she knows then, she's understood who God is, who Jesus is, and who she is, and she knows that He has the words of eternal life. She knows that in Him is her true identity. And I think that in this time in 2020, we've clearly seen who God is and who we are by comparison. Sometimes I think we really can fool ourselves into thinking that we're in control of our lives, that we have our little world in order. And actually, this whole situation has made us stop and say, we don't. God is the one in control. He is the almighty, all-powerful. But at the same time, He is the one who loves each of us intimately and desires a relationship with us and will never leave us, no matter what circumstances we're in. And we need to be able to go to Him and find our identity in Him. And I think this situation has just reminded us of those truths that sometimes we can forget easily, and we can think that actually this life revolves around us and that we have control of what happens in this world. So that's the first thing I feel like I can see more clearly. The second thing that has really struck me has been the need to live one day at a time. When we were in the first month of lockdown, I was reading the book of Numbers. And there was a passage in the book of Numbers that really struck me in a new way. I want to read it to you from the Message, the version of the Message. It's in chapter 9, and the last half of the chapter says this: "The day the dwelling was set up, a cloud covered the dwelling of the tent of testimony. From sunset until daybreak, it was over the dwelling. It looked like fire. It was like that all the time, the cloud over the dwelling, at night looking like fire. When the cloud lifted above the tent, the people of Israel marched out. When the cloud descended, the people camped. The people of Israel marched at God's command, and they camped at his command. As long as the cloud was over the dwelling, they camped. Even when the cloud hovered over the dwelling for many days, they honored God's command and wouldn't march. They stayed in camp, obedient to God's command, as long as the cloud was over the dwelling. But the moment God issued orders, they marched. If the cloud stayed only from sunset to daybreak, and then lifted at daybreak, they marched. Night or day, it made no difference. When the cloud lifted, they marched. It made no difference whether the cloud hovered over the dwelling for 2 days, or a month, or a year. As long as the cloud was there, they were there. And when the cloud went up, they got up and marched. They camped at God's command, and they marched at God's command. They lived obediently by God's orders, as delivered by Moses." The context of that passage is the story of the children of Israel when they have been set free from their captivity in Egypt, and they're in the desert being led by Moses. And God sent this pillar of cloud to guide them. It was a pillar of cloud in the day and pillar of fire at night. And they had to follow it. So whenever it stopped, they stopped. Whenever it moved, they moved. And the thing that really struck me from that passage was they didn't know from morning to night, from one day to the next, whether they were going to be staying camped or they were going to be moving. And sometimes they stayed for a few days. Sometimes they stayed for a month. Sometimes they stayed for more than a year in one place. But the key thing was that they were always obedient to what God was saying to them, following his commands. For me, it was it just impacted me as such incredible dependence. And we talk a lot about our need to be dependent on God, but I'm not really sure we understand what that looks like. And I think this concept of day by day, moment by moment, keeping our eyes fixed on God, they had the clouds to help them, and following his command, following his lead. And I really feel like with the situation that we've been in over these last few months, we haven't had any other option but to live day by day. We can't make plans. We don't know how the situation's going to change. We don't know when we may be going back into lockdown. We just don't know when we can travel again, particularly flying. So we have been forced to live day by day. But actually, that's God's plan. That's God's desire, that we have that kind of total dependence on him. And I'm not saying that we never make plans and we never go on holiday. We're great ones for planning, and we teach people how to plan and how to be strategic and how to think ahead and use their time well and all of those things. And those things are important. But I think we need to hold our plans in an open hand. We need to hold on to things lightly, and we need to be sensitive to God's Holy Spirit and his leading, as to be flexible when things change. And I think so many of us struggled so much at the beginning of lockdown because we had found our security and our dependence in our plans and not in God. And I think God is shaking us up. He's giving us the opportunity to see how wrong we were in depending on plans and seeking security in things that we can control rather than in him. And he wants to call us back to that relationship of total dependence, of being able to rest in him, of being able to trust what he's doing, of being able to follow his leading and be obedient to his voice, day by day, hour by hour. So that's something that's really struck me and helped me. Another thing that has been significant for me is the concept of working from a place of rest. We've been teaching online over the last few months, and one of the courses that we've put up online for anyone who's interested in going further is working from a place of rest. And it's the whole concept of what is rest? What does it really mean to be able to, again, depend and trust in God, to lean on him, to do everything from that position of security and dependence? And biblically, what did rest mean? How did it start? And so it's about being, not about doing. It's about enjoying God and enjoying our relationship with him. It's about taking time to breathe. And you know, God has forced us to do those things over this period of time. We've had to stop a lot of the things that we were doing we can't do anymore. And he's asked us just to stop and enjoy him and to go deeper with him and to breathe and to trust him and to learn what it means to lean on him in that way. So I think he's calling us all into that new and refreshing relationship with him, where yes, we will work and we will do things, but we'll do it from that starting point of that deep trust in him. Another thing that I think has been really interesting to learn over this period of time, and I know we've talked about it over and over again in our churches, but to see it as a reality, is that the importance of community and how much we need each other. And tied with that, the idea that church is not about buildings. I'm sure many of you at the beginning of this whole situation were wondering, how on earth is church going to work? How are we going to be able to keep ministering to people? How are we going to do what we normally do? And it has been amazing and so encouraging to see how God has pushed us out of our comfort zone and helped us to find new ways of building community and being church. We've all learned so much about technology, about Zoom, about videos, about Facebook Live, all those things that we had no idea, most of us, about last year. And you know, we have been able to continue to grow, and yet the church, in actual fact, is growing in this period of time. There are so many people connecting now that weren't before. And being digital just opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And yes, we miss giving each other a hug and being physically present, but the things like Zoom and the WhatsApp chats and things enable us to still be open and honest and vulnerable with one another, to still minister to one another, to still pray together. So church is about community, it's about the people, it's not about the buildings. The buildings are tools that God has given us to use as part of his process, but we're not dependent on them, and we've realised that. And I believe that most churches, as a result of this time, are stronger, more unified. There's a deeper sense of community, and we're growing, and more people are coming to know Jesus and understanding that the hope is in him and nothing else. The other thing I think that I've learned is, on a personal level, is to value people. You know, when you're cut off and you can't go out, I didn't leave the house for 4 months because of our strict lockdown, you start to think about who are the people that really matter in your life. And you start to become very intentional about seeking connection with them. And again, we are so thankful for technology. We're so thankful that God has allowed this situation to happen at a time when these kind of technologies are available. And I have personally connected with friends and family intentionally that maybe I wouldn't have done before because I would have been too busy to make them a priority. But when you stop and you think, who are the people that are really important in my life? And you can identify those people, then you can be intentional about building into those relationships. And I want to encourage you, having seen that, let's not lose it as the situation begins to change. Let's not just rush back into our lives and get too busy again. Let's remember who are the important people in our lives, and let's be intentional about continuing to connect with them in different ways and build into their lives and enjoy being with them. So let's not lose the things that we've learned. Another thing that I think I've learned personally and I've seen in the people around me is just the fresh realization of how creative we are. We're created in God's image. And one of the amazing things about God is his creativity. We live out in the countryside in Bolivia, and just the variety of birds, the many different kinds of toucans, for example, that fly around here, or the numbers of different kinds of parrots, the variety of colours, of sizes, of the way that they call out. God is a creative God, and he's made us to be creative people. And sometimes we've put creativity in a box, like if you can paint or you're an artist, then you're creative. And we've discounted other things, but all of us are creative. And I think in this period of time, we've all seen that. We've all been creative in learning new things to do with technology. Lots of us have had to be very creative in terms of our cooking. Well, because we live so far away from town, we haven't had access to supermarkets for 4 months. We've had to rely on what the corner shop sells. And so I've had to be very creative in what I'm cooking and learning new things and experimenting with new things. We haven't been able to get workmen to come in and do repairs on our homes, and so we've had to be creative in Googling it, going onto YouTube and learning how to do repairs ourselves. There are just so many ways in which we've learned new creative skills, and I think that's a wonderful reflection of who God the Father is and his creativity in us. And he wants us to continue to grow in our creativity in all sorts of different areas. And to be those people. I think sometimes we put ourselves in a box and we think, well, this person is creative and I'm not. I'm not musical, I'm not artistic. But there are other creative things that God has put in you. So learn, experiment, take risks, enjoy doing new things as part of the learning process. The other thing that I think I've learned too is how to live more simply, is the fact that actually we don't need a lot of the things that we have in our lives. And again, maybe because of the context that we're in, we were forced to live that way because we didn't have access to go into town at all or to get the things that we normally get. But actually, they're luxuries that we don't need in our lives. And we can live more simply and enjoy the simple things. Enjoy going out and taking a walk or looking at a sunset, or enjoying the basic foods that we've managed to cook. So I think it's important to remember that we don't need a lot of this other stuff. And as we're looking ahead now, we need to evaluate, okay, well, what have we learned? And how is that going to change the way that I live my life moving forward? The way that I spend my money moving forward, the things that are important to me in my life moving forward. And tied in with that is the ability to really value the small things, really value the WhatsApp message from a friend, to really value the toucan that comes and perches on the tree and just sings a beautiful song, or to just the little things in life, special food that we could cook or something. Just enjoy those, the moments of connection as a family, the good conversations with our children. And sometimes in the past, I think, my life has been so full of activity that I haven't had the time to stop and really value those things. Rushing from one thing to another, it just becomes part of a blur of a day. Whereas now we've learnt to slow down, to stop and reflect more, we can really value those things more. So I want to encourage each one of you to put this question to God, to take time out to reflect for yourself. What do you see more clearly as a result of everything that we've lived through so far in 2020? And how is that going to change the way that you live from here on out? What lessons are you going to take with you as we move out of lockdown and into a new phase? What things do you not want to forget? I just really encourage you to take the opportunity that God has given us. It's been a hard year in many, many ways. And many, many people have suffered, and there's so much hurt. But in the middle of it all, God is still there. He still loves us. And He longs for us to understand His heart, to be able to depend totally on Him, to be able to prioritize the things that are priorities for Him, to be able to be sensitive to His Spirit and move when He speaks in obedience. So I encourage you to take time out to do that. And I do thank you for your support of us and for your continued prayers for us in the work that we're doing here in Bolivia. God bless you all. Goodbye.